for you.
Oh yeah, like he was in the band for several years and like partied on the train, and he would like go through whenever they'd come through town.
I love it.
Hello, 100%. I'm enjoying this chat. I'm glad.
I could, if I was better equipped to like put it back into place, I would show. I have like a little mini aerial rig in the other room because for a while I tried to like do circus as a hobby. Was I was writing circus books, and it was after I wrote the circus books actually. But like, so I was like during the pandemic, well, I'll just have a mini little aerial hammock. Why bother owning a house if you can't?
Yeah, if you can't break up your own aerial.
Everyone who comes in the door, it's not a sex swing. Anytime we have cleaners, visitors who've been here for the first time, it's like, this is an aerial hammock.
You're like, this is not what you think it is. I actually saw a review. I saw a review for a sex swing recently that said they used it to bathe their dogs outside. So they'd hang it from a tree, and then they'd like throw their like mastiff in it and wash their dog outside. And they're like, rave review, this is perfect for shampooing your dog.
Or whatever else you might be shampooing.
Yeah, whatever else you're shampooing out in your backyard. That's your business. So guys, welcome everybody for coming and hanging out with us. I am Vicki from Nowhere Bookshop, and we are joined tonight by Aiden, also from Nowhere Bookshop, and the author of this month's pick, well actually last month's pick, Gwenda Bond, Not Your Average Hot Guy. We all have our books. And I was like, we all have our books. I was like, and I was just rereading it this afternoon to refresh myself before we chatted. I listened to the audio. Did you get a chance to actually listen to any of the audio?
I have not listened to the audio, but I did help cast it. And
I was going to say, because Callie's voice is great.
And I was like, make her a little Southern, not too Southern. And they were like, well, Carissa is a little Southern herself, so it'll be great.
Because listening to it, I was immediately like, this accent, I was like, has to be purposeful, because it's very much like, it's very much a choice.
Yes. And they asked me pronunciations and stuff, which they don't always do. And so some of them I had to figure out, and some I learned I've been saying wrong my whole life, as you do whenever you have to learn how to pronounce something.
I mean, that's the same thing in Texas. Like everything has wild names and wild pronunciations that will vary from place to place.
Well, like it's that reader thing, right? Where you've only seen something on the page and your brain has rendered it in a certain way, and then you've never really heard anyone use it out loud, and you're like, well,
it's like with Harry Potter, no one had heard the name Hermione in their lives.
Right. Yeah. If I were just looking at it, I would be like, Hermione.
Yeah, I did not pronounce it right until those movies started coming out. I was like,
names. Oof. Like I was a kid, I read, like Edith Hamilton mythology like over and over and over, but did I know whether there was
no idea.
I still don't know half the time. I have to look it up.
Persephone? Yeah, that was
I've got a Persephone here.
I got a Persephone here. You bring it out. It's just a phone you keep in your purse. It's a Persephone.
And of course, I will make sure you guys get.
Yes, send us the new one, because I'm excited.
The sequel, which comes out in April.
I know, we saw that when we were picking this one. I was like, dang, she's already got another one coming out. I was like, that is fast, and I'm here for it.
The best thing is when you are ahead, and when publishing is slow and you are ahead enough that can happen. Because it's already done and written. And I wrote it during the pandemic, which was fun. Not fun. But the book itself is fun, and it was nice to like get to do like the second. Oh my gosh, someone has a sex swing story that's hilarious.
That is not mine.
I love it.
It's like, or claim it, be like,
absolutely.
Yes, it is.
I mean,
I use it to wash my dog.
I'm gonna have to put that in a book now.
I thought that was a really funny review.
I'll have to write a new I'll have to write another circus book just so I can fit in the dog washing.
Dog washing.
Yeah. So what questions do you guys have for me? What kind of format do you usually do on these? As
We
you
keep
can tell,
it.
I just babble.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how we keep it around here. Everything's
Awesome.
pretty loosey-goosey with the Zooms around for the book clubs. The people who come and hang out with us are always really fun. So welcome everybody. And this is only the second one that we've had for the romance book club. So we're still playing with the format of this one too, seeing if there's anything we want to try, but usually keep it pretty conversational and then lead into some questions. Did you have a good Halloween?
I had a great Halloween. This is the first year that I have lived out my dream since we bought this house and moved in about 15 years ago of actually, if you hear a weird noise in the background, by the way, it's not a sex swing. It's a border collie.
I was gonna say, is it a dog?
There are three.
Bring him in. No.
Let's see. That's something, Sally. That's Izzy, who is Bosch in the book, basically. And then little old man Puck, you can't quite see, and he's not gonna get up for anyone. He's 16, so he's like
no, thank you.
He's just chilling. Hopefully, no one will deliver any packages or anything, so they'll all freak out. Gosh, what did you ask me?
Oh, I asked, what did you do for Halloween? You were just about to tell us your dream Halloween.
Right. So we decorated our front yard with lots of stuff, including a skeleton climbing out of the ground. And someone actually brought shoes and left them for the skeleton the first night. And we have like a little kid who lives next door named Roman, and two kids across the street. So it's the first time we've ever really had kids on our block. So we were like, we know we'll get at least 3 trick-or-treaters. So we got comic books, age-appropriate comic books, and candy. But then we actually had like 12 trick-or-treaters. And we also have which is for us amazing. Like the first year we moved in here, I made like gift bags because my mom was always Ms. Halloween in the small town where I grew up. And I thought, well, the children will come because there's sidewalks. We grew up in the middle of nowhere, but no, there was no one. And so this year, like we were like, we won't buy that much candy though. And we actually had trick-or-treaters. So next year we're going to try to make it bigger. But we have the best setup in the world because our neighbors are slightly younger than us. Mm-hmm. And they throw parties, and we actually like all their friends. They're really interesting. So we just go to like crash their Halloween party, and we don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
You're clean. And the minute you're done, you're just like, all right, I'm going home now. Like, you just walk back over. So that's what we did.
Yeah, you're like, have fun cleaning your house.
Absolutely, right? It's great because, and they, and also our dogs don't bark at people, and we don't have to stress about them being up in anybody's face. Because they're all rescues and like varying degrees of behaved.
Yeah. I'm like, I just have fussy cats that don't pay attention to me.
We also have 2 cats. So we're living that big top life in terms of pets with big personalities.
Yeah, you need like a lizard and like a bird.
Oh no. Don't let my husband hear you say that. Or a pygmy goat or chickens. Oh.
The pygmy goat, and then I had to immediately look up videos of pygmy goats. And I'm like, oh man, how cute!
They are cute.
They are so cute. I don't think pygmy fainting goats are a thing.
They don't.
Right? I don't think that's a thing.
Only one. There's only one.
Only one, and it's Cupcake.
And the sequel.
I'm glad to know that he'll be making another appearance in the sequel.
Oh yeah, I mean, Bosch and Cupcake are like best friends, so now they are. So of course,
yeah, I like that. In like, okay, we're gonna keep Cupcake, you guys. Like, we can't get rid of it. One
promise I made early on in my career is that I would never kill an animal in a book.
That's such a nice promise.
Immediately became difficult because I have a book where someone is killed while an animal is involved, and literally I make the last words like "Don't kill blank." So the animal gets to live, but the human dies.
Because I'm literally that person like watching a horror movie where I'm all like, "There's a dog here," and then like you have to go. There's a website called "Does the Dog Die?" And you can go onto this website and find out if something happens.
I mean, I cannot believe the people of Twitter who have known me, many of them, for a long time and in real life, once let me get most of the way through the Babadook before I was like, hang on a second. What?
You're like, wait a minute.
Hang on. Did you guys encourage me to watch this movie knowing? And they're like, yeah, abort now. Abort now. And I'm like, great.
You're like, but now I'm in. The first time I watched the movie Alien, and I'm watching it, going in, knowing there's aliens, knowing that people are going to die. And then I hear like, meow. And I go, wait a minute. There's a cat? Who invited the cat to space? The cat doesn't want to be in space. It's a cat. And then I had to Google if the cat was okay, because I was like, we're turning this the hell off if anything happens to that cat.
1000%. Also, it's usually just a sign of like lazy writing. Like 9 times out of 10, it's just either a sign, it's either an attempt to manipulate you emotionally, and it doesn't factor into anything else that happens in the story. Like, there are obvious exceptions to this, and that is actually Jenny Cruzy made a post about this once, and it's sort of my rule is that like I will read or watch a story if there's an actual significant reason and impact to an animal dying.
If there's a reason to go through this, but
it's so rare. Like oh gosh, what is that dystopian series the guy from England wrote, and the dog, I've almost blurred it in my mind because it was so traumatic. The third book, the animal, the dog. Oh, I just spoiled the series, but it's like 10 or 15.
None of us want to read it anyways.
Nobody's gonna read it. Never mind.
No one's gonna read it anyways.
I don't know what now that we know that good dog dies, and for what? Patrick Ness. Yes, that's it.
You're like, it's dystopian and a dog dies.
Like, the dog's the only good character. No, I mean, that's not true of those books. Those are good books, but
yeah, Patrick Ness is great, but I'm sure it's just so sad.
A bone to pick, Pat. Like, did we have to go through that?
You're like, did you need to do this to me? I think not.
I think not. There was another way. Kill a small child instead.
You're like, not in real life or anything.
Not
just like
real
on
life.
The page.
Book morality is different than real life morality.
We talked about this in the Grady Hendrix event too, that it was just like, about how like just kill small kids. Like, killing dogs is way rougher than killing people.
I mean, it's like the example that I always give is like if you are a bad tipper in a book, like, you are less sympathetic than a serial murderer. Like, you know, like, we would empathize with the murderer in a book if we find them charming enough, or like root for them a little bit. But if someone is like stiffing people on tips, we're like, this person's irredeemable. Like, are the worst. Kind of true in real life as well, but
also can't trust poor tippers.
No, can't trust anyone. Poor tippers and serial killers, kind of on the same level.
There was a guy in the store, I think yesterday, and we were talking about cats. Just like the staff, I think it was like me, Sam, and Elizabeth. And he just randomly decided to supply in that he had gotten a cat because he lives on a ranch and they had a mouse problem. So like they got the cat to take care of the mice, but the cat ended up attacking his wife and biting her and cutting her. And we're like, oh my gosh, like, how crazy. He's like, it's okay, she shot him with a shotgun. I was like, what?
No.
Read the room. I was like, none of us are like, oh yeah. I'm like, I think your wife deserved it, but she like turned around and shot the cat with a shotgun.
No, sir.
I hope she had to go to the ER and get antibiotics and stuff.
I know.
Because cat bites are nothing to mess around with.
People feel really comfortable telling booksellers things that you really like. We did not ask.
My husband was a bookseller for years, so I'm well aware.
We're like, we did not ask for that. We're like, Aiden just stole her neighbor's cat, and because it looked skinny.
I mean, fair. Very fair. Wow. Yeah, that's a bit much. That's more than you want to know. Yeah, growing up on the farm, I shouldn't tell this story because it makes my mom sound terrible, and she's actually wonderful. But my grandmother was a crazy cat lady, and she had these two elderly Siamese cats who probably did need to be put down. So my mom, I guess, volunteered to do this, and but she did not do a good job.
No.
And so they came back. And they came back. Their names were Happy and Lucky.
Oh no, they were not.
They came back, and it was kind of like, well, they survived, so now we have to just keep them around.
Yeah, you can't get rid of the zombie cats, as someone just said, like, zombie cats. Like, no, you can't send them back now.
No, but it was like one of the guys in the family that they originally spotted them and just lost it.
Just be horrified. I would be like Pet Cemetery immediately. No, thank you.
Exactly. I mean, I was horrified to find out my mother had did this. I was like, outsource it to a professional. And she's like, these are farm cats, you know.
I mean, I grew up in the country too, so it's like
it's just different. It's just different.
It's still rough. And you never want to find zombie cats, like, even in the country.
No, I think she learned her lesson too. I don't believe that there were any more. I don't believe she volunteered for that job anymore. Like, they called the vet after that.
Yeah, she's like, sorry about that.
You think that childhood trauma influenced your love of sort of like horror stuff and devilish stuff?
Yeah, like it was the zombie cats.
Always interested in scary stuff, but I have to admit I was a huge wuss, and also like I mean, I was very susceptible. Like, my suspension of disbelief, like I was born with it fully developed, right? And even though I always knew I wanted to be a writer and would tell stories and memorize, I always tell the most me, like young me story. Well, there's two about becoming a writer. Was that my parents were teachers and then later principals in my small town, so it explains a lot about my authority issues. But we had a lot of access to books, and they were both readers, and I would make like loops on paper and then show it to them when they came home from their long grueling days of work. They're like, did I make any words when I was a toddler? And then I would also memorize picture books, or I would make up and pretend I was reading them roughly along with the picture at school. And my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Little, called me out on it one day. And it's like, you can't read. That's not what happens. And I'm like, maybe you can't read. And then she sent me to my dad. So
she's like, I don't want to talk to you right now.
Exactly. So I was very susceptible though to horror. My brother, I had a 4-year older brother, and so he was always watching horror movies, and I was always fascinated with them, but also then I would just sit up all night and read, like convinced that like it's only safe to sleep when it's light out. Like, that was my 5th and 6th grade years, which I don't think my parents realized. And so I did always love that stuff and was always super susceptible to it. I remember a 4th grade, like, kind of obsession with Nightmare on Elm Street, which most of us were not able to see, but someone had either seen it or had been told about it in detail by their brother and told everyone. And somehow it was so much scarier, like the secondhand version. Like, made it seem like,
because like in your mind you're imagining it, it's way worse. You're like,
right. And so the whole class is obsessed with this, and then finally, like, somebody gets a VHS tape like a year later, and we watch it and we're like, oh, this isn't like nearly, as scary as we expected it to be. And I also ghost stories in the South. Both my grandmothers were ghost story people, and I don't know a single creative writer who grew up in a Christian church that wasn't obsessed with the imagery in the Book of Revelations and what I like spooky. What I like to refer to as the fantasy scenes in the Bible, like the Jacob's ladder, like there's like a list of, like, usually they were illustrated, and like most kids, like, I think, like, have read those parts of the Bible.
That was the best part. That was the wildest, spookiest, crazy part that you're like, wait, what's going to happen?
Right. So I have always loved that stuff. And, you know, like when I wrote the Suspicious Minds book, you're playing all that stuff straight, right? Like that's not the humor. Like I think there's my friend Sherry Priest, who I just did an event with, has this theory that like humor and horror are very close together because they're both involuntary responses. And I think my sense of humor is like very screwball, and I think you get that in these books. Like it's very like it's almost like it really is like 1930s and 40s screwball comedy banter is like what's in my heart. And so like it's all very fast talking and like but it now could we make people like vaguely sort of like not the 1940s but secretly in their heart of hearts they're in the 1940s. And so I don't know, like I can't believe I got away with writing and publishing these bizarro books. Like, I mean, you know, did I think anyone would let me write a screwball rom-com about the apocalypse and then be like, how about a sequel? No, I did not. So I feel like I got away with something here. And
you're all like, look what I did.
I just wrote this to delight myself, really. Like the idea came fully formed and I worked on it in spare time and didn't tell like my agent about it or anything. And I was not convinced that anyone would want or publish these books, but I had a super fun time writing them. And I really am enjoying, like, I love rom-com. Like, there are all sorts of genres that I love that I think I won't end up writing. And what I have come to accept is that anything that I love that I'm like, I don't have any ideas for that, like, it's coming. Like, it's
like it'll
just a
show
matter
up eventually.
of time. Yeah, it's just a matter of time.
Do you have a favorite rom-com?
Oh my gosh, I've got so many, like across different things. But I do really love the 30s and 40s rom-coms.
Yeah.
There's one obscure one that I always recommend to people because most people haven't seen it. Like I love a Bring It Baby, anything with Barbara Stanwyck, like Ball of Fire. Both of those, and this one is also this is the only movie written by Billy Wilder, not directed by Billy Wilder, that I think feels like a Billy Wilder movie. Midnight with Claudette Colbert and a young smoking hot Don Amici. Like Google young Don Amici and you'll be like, oh yeah, like I could see it. I would do that. I would hit that. He was and so it's them and it's a riff on Cinderella and like the title comes from this great line that's every Cinderella gets her midnight.
Cute.
Yeah. And so it's like this woman who pretends to be an heiress and she meets this taxi driver who sees right through her and they have an immediate bond and he starts trailing her around and kind of, you know, starting to blow her cover a bit. So it's a little bit like a reverse Cinderella because she ends up with the poor guy. And like a lot of these movies that were sort of reactions to the Great Depression, there's a lot of interesting class dynamics. And you just can't beat like the dialogue and they definitely have like dated things about them, but I think one of the cool things about that sort of screwball, like we talked about Cupcake already and the people here who have read the book, like that is a solution to a problem involving a bad guy that you could only do, right? Like in something that is embracing every ridiculous possibility, right? Like, and some people love that. And some people are like, this is just weird. Like, this is just bonkers.
I really just kind of like fell into the ride at a certain point. Cause I think I started the book
like, I want. Like, I just want these to be like pure fun. And also like, I speak as someone who loves Dan Brown shit as well. Not the actual thing he produces or his work, but I love the idea of it. And I love like anything that is like we're in a library, like, you know, we're fondling old books for secrets and there's people holding things and all that Indiana Jones stuff too. But it is inherently ridiculous. And so like it just feels like having a little fun with like poking, you know, like actually having like there be some ridiculousness adjacent to the ridiculousness.
Yeah, I was just like, oh, we're going full apocalypse. Okay, sure.
I mean, it, you know, in retrospect, had I known I was writing a book too, actually, I think this works in the both books' favor though, if I had known I would write a second book, I probably would have been like, don't start with the apocalypse, because it's like, what are the stakes? But then like
the stakes are so high. And now we're like,
a conversation with my friend and who's in my writing group and who gave a very generous blurb for this book, Alex Harrow, who I had an event with last night. And she was like, no, it's like The Good Place. Like every season just kind of flips it into a new, like the stakes are high in every season, and every season just kind of like flips it into a new problem. And I was like, oh yes, thank you for saying that. Like that is very helpful.
Because you're like, there can't be any more twist in The Good Place. And then they just keep going.
Right. So it's proof that like you can do that. And especially in a reality where you've, like set up that basically anything can happen. And also like Luke and Callie have found each other, but they still have not really found like their paths of what they're gonna do with their lives. And so it felt nice to be able to, the second book I think is fun in that it's basically like happy endings for everyone, but also lots of characters from the first book, and also just seeing more of the world. Like there's more of the Guardians, there's more of Lucifer being a bad Lucifer, because Lucifer is often like such a hot guy, himself.
He's kind of funny. I don't know. I found your Lucifer kind of funny.
He's like a toxic masculinity, but there's somewhere buried in there, maybe like some glimmer of hope. And and in the second book, he's having some fun at the expense of everyone, as you would expect. And I will warn everyone right now, if you read the second book, there is a moment when I was definitely on root canal drugs that I wrote. And I'm like, there's no way this will stay in the book. But it did. And it involves Lilith singing Guns N' Roses. So.
And there were such fun characters too. I loved Lilith and I loved Styx. I thought they were so much fun to read and to like see these little like.
I love Lilith. Writing Lilith is fun.
Lilith is great,
and you get more of both of them in the next book, and a little more Callie's mom, more Mag and Jared, of course. More Porsoth.
I loved Porsoth. I really want to see a happy ending for Porsoth. I was like, I didn't know.
Porsoth
I was coming
kind of a player. I mean, really, honestly, like the second book of this, I was like, who can get a happy ending? I was like Oprah with Cars. You get a happy ending, and you get a happy ending, and you, who we just met.
They're like, you get one too. Check under your seat. There's a happy ending.
Also, like Soraya in this book is a much bigger part of book 2, because I love to take a character that is initially like in opposition to someone, and then make them have to work together. Like, I think that's always a fun dynamic. And I always like to subvert like the idea that you have female characters who don't get along, right? It's like hardwired. They'll never get along. So that's fun. Yeah.
So have you ever designed an escape room?
I have not.
No?
So a lot of my books are like other lives I might live or things I might do. I have done an escape room, and that's where I got the idea for this book.
Yeah.
And also the family that ran the escape room like kind of went out of their way so we could do it, and chit-chatted with us a bit. And they had a dog like behind the counter, a nice dog. And I just thought, I'm always fascinated by both people's work in different work situations. And also I love a family business. Like I've written a couple series now about family businesses. The circus books are, we were talking before, for those who were here early, about how much that is a family business. And I think that always makes for interesting dynamics, right? Because you still have to find your own way, even if you're a kid that comes from a tradition, and decide whether you're going to be part of it or reject it. And so I think that's always interesting. But a lot of the escape room research was just me bothering people who do work at escape rooms and asking them lots of questions. And looking at their like trade association websites and that sort of thing.
Do they have conventions? Like, is that a thing?
Oh, everything.
I mean, everything has a convention. Yeah,
everything has a convention,
seminars,
like all of the lore in the book and all of that's not obviously invented, like, you know, like the Grey Keep I came up with, like the way I'm using some of these things, and some of the characters are created or a riff on them, but like most of the lore that is relevant to the plot and the locations that are in the real world are real. And the book in the box, the puzzle box that like Callie finds is like that was a type of Italian puzzle box. And I did all of this deep Googling to figure out what kind of box would make sense and like be cool and how it worked. And then I happened to be at like one of the weird things that happens when you're an author is you get invited to like parties at rich people's houses. Like, and so there was a Kentucky there's a Kentucky Writers Hall of Fame, and these rich people were having a reception there for everyone who was invited, all the writers who were invited. And I was reading for Sue Grafton's induction. So we got invited and we were poking around, and they had this very expensive art collection, right? But the husband also collected boxes. And so there's all these probably like more than my car is worth, like boxes sitting around, and one of them was one of the Italian boxes that looks like a stack of books. So I like, of course, pick it up and like work it to make sure it works like it did in the book, because I was writing at the time, and I've got pictures of it on my iPhone somewhere. And then I went very excitedly to tell the couples we were leaving, like, by the way, you have this Italian puzzle box that is just like one in the book that I'm writing. And like, oh, do you want a closer look at it? And I'm like, oh.
You're like, I already grabbed all over that box.
I've already done that, new friends. Hopefully I didn't damage anything too valuable.
He picks it up later and it just disintegrates.
I found the key to where the Holy Lance is buried. I'll be leaving now.
In my mind, I'm just all like, Hellraiser box, put it down.
Well, I mean, yeah, see, that's where my curiosity gets the better of me. I'm like, oh, this looks exactly like, I'm just gonna.
You look like a hell box. I should play with it.
Let's see what's inside.
And I'm like, it's probably a mogwai. I don't want it.
Just don't feed it after midnight.
Don't feed it after midnight.
Midnight where?
Midnight where? The loopholes in the mogwai lore are so frustrating.
Actually, I was once trapped in a terrible casino next door to a convention hotel in Vegas.
With a mogwai?
With a Gremlins slot machine.
Did you play
this
it?
place really is trapped in time.
You're like, huh. Where were you at? Like, so the hotel we were at was the Rio, which is a hellmouth. And it was for an RT, and they only had one small Starbucks for an entire, and no room service for an entire convention of romance readers and fans. Oh, and so I'm like, I'm set down on foot. I'm gonna find coffee. And so I went to the like more local-ish place next door, which is where this was the Gremlins. And I got trapped in it. I wandered around. There's a bowling alley in it. There were shining ass hallways in every direction. I really like didn't everything know smells like cigarettes. You're like, this is how I die.
Been there, it's like, yes, it's all like these ancient Las Vegans who are like, we go home when we have no quarters left. And and yeah, no, it was, I did eventually find coffee, and it turned out it was right next to the front door after I came in and wandered around for like 45 minutes.
You're like, oh God, I escaped the Mogwai pinball machine.
Exactly.
The kitty.
Oh, this is Phoebe.
I was like, not a zombie cat. Oh, what a
not a zombie cat. Just a cat that likes to hang out on my desk while I'm Zooming.
She's like, are you talking to people again?
You can't block the whole camera.
But I want to.
She does want to. Sally, calm down.
Somebody asked a question. When did you decide to write another book with these characters?
So it wasn't until after I sold the first book, honestly, when we were bouncing around what would be the second book on that contract. I had a few different ideas, one of which I'm writing right now. and I really was like, I felt like I had given them enough of a happy ever after that, I didn't necessarily need to see more of them. But I do always like to end a book with like an open-ended possibility for more. And I do love to write second books. Like I love second books. I think they're always fun because you get to kind of deepen the characters that you know. So when they suggested kind of mashing up a couple of ideas that I had and us getting to take Callie and Luke to a real happy ever after, I was absolutely like 100% on board, and the plot came pretty quickly after that. Writing it was harder because it was during the pandemic. And then the book that I'm finishing up now is my third rom-com with St. Martin's, and it's called Mr. and Mrs. Witch. And it is Mr. and Mrs. Smith beats Bewitched, basically, in which a couple discovers that they are a witch and a witch hunter on their wedding day. and hijinks ensue. So I'm having a lot of fun with this genre, and I do really I just love rom-com. I love the humor of it, but also the characters that meet each other and make each other better versions of themselves. I'm a real sucker for. I think my Lois Lane books are also heavily rom-com influenced, because I think that the original Superman movie is like half screwball newsroom comedy with Margot Kidder and Christopher Reeve as Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell, and half action superhero movie.
Yeah, it is a silly movie.
It's a silly movie.
It's a silly movie.
And the romance is a huge part of it. So like that's very much like something that I built in when I was writing those characters myself. So and again, that was another case where I thought I only knew for sure I would be writing one book. And then I was lucky enough to get to follow the characters over a couple more books. And I think that in some ways I'm better prepared for that now. Like I'm always thinking like, if I'm asked to write a second book with these characters, will I just be saying yes for money? Or will I be saying yes because I have another story to tell with them? And I really honestly, would say no if I didn't have a story, because writing books is not easy. And also I don't want to waste anyone's time. So it has to feel like there's a reason for it to exist for me. And in this case, like I definitely had ideas. I just didn't know if like I said, I did not think anyone would buy this. I wasn't sure if it would ever see the light of day. My agent admitted to me later that she actually hates this kind of book. And so when I did send her like the first 50 pages, she was like, I have a lot of questions and I need you to write the whole thing. And then after I did write the whole thing and sent it to her, she was like, I did want to tell you, but I do hate this kind of thing, like gods and demons and all of this. But I love this book, so it's okay.
You're like, but there's a goat.
That's nice. But maybe if you told me that up front, I would have been less like, oh God, this is doomed, but I'm writing it anyway.
Were you a romance reader before you wrote this?
Oh, 1000%.
Yeah.
So I became a romance reader about a decade ago, although I will say I snuck a lot of my mom's Harlequins when I was a kid.
The Bodice Rippers,
and pretending to be too cool to read romance. And when I was a teenager, I was insufferable and pretentious, and surely felt like I needed to be reading like only works in translation and shit like that. And like
I'm reading Infinite Jest.
Jim Morrison's like, poetry, as if those things.
You're just holding it. You're not
right.
And you're going home and reading like rancher romance. Like,
well, I mean, I read everything, and I think I just didn't feel like everything. It was acceptable to say you read everything. And in my household, it really was like that was the only thing my mom ever like gave me. Like she gave me Gothics instead, but didn't have the explicit sex scenes. But I was like, oh, I love these, right? Because they're like women in haunted houses, basically. But I did not read it faithfully, like as a genre, until about 10 years ago. I'm looking because I could tell you that 2010, 2009, 2010. A confluence of things. One, I was in grad school at Vermont College of Fine Arts, and a local to Texas writer, Sin Laddick Smith, was one of the instructors there and one of my mentors. And she talked about how if you had trouble crafting emotional journeys, that like her recommendation was you read like 100 romance novels, because romance novels are the best at it. And I'm like, okay, all right. And then also I came kind of out of a science fiction and fantasy background, which you can probably tell. And I was used to people jumping on the genre who weren't very well read in it. And so whenever people would start side-eyeing, even within a genre, I would be like, well, I'm going to read it and see what I think. And so like I had already discovered urban fantasy. And that was kind of the heyday of that, which I loved, and that a heavy crossover romance wise. And I was also writing part-time because I had a literary blog. Like if anyone remembers what that was, lit blogs. I have one, and I managed to parlay it into a bunch of freelance writing for various places, but especially Publishers Weekly. And so I did a bunch of category features for them where I just got to quiz like people in publishing about all sorts of things, which means I know way too much about publishing. But one of the categories I covered a couple of times was romance. And I was really struck by how enthusiastic and what fans the editors and writers were of each other's work, which was not something that I commonly encountered covering other categories. And so I wrote this piece, and I thought, well, I better investigate like what this genre is about. And so I remember I like read Jenny Cruzy's catalog, was basically like my gateway drug. And Marjorie Liu, I had been reading her urban fantasies and then crossed over into her romances, and then now have followed her into comics. But the RWA in 2010 gave me an award for writing what essentially gave me the Veritas Award, which is an award they give journalists who essentially write non-dickish pieces about romance.
You're like, thanks for writing something nice about us.
But I was very honored. And so I went to RWA and I'm like, I should read more of this. And so I actually have like a post on my blog from 2010 that you can find that's like the year of reading deliciously. And it's all of the romances that were my gateway romances that year. And I've since, like inducted many friends into the Adult Society of Romance Readers, because people who didn't think it was for them for whatever reason. But yeah, it is a heavy part of my rotation always. And like, when I got this book, like physically, it just makes me happy, because like, so many of the books that have made me happy in the past like 10 years, but especially the last 2 years, are like exactly this trim size and feel exactly this way, and even if I'm
You're
reading
like, one of them's
Kindle,
yours, which is Jenny Cruzy was totally my gateway and contemporary. And then Sarah McLean I met at that RWA when she was transitioning from YA to adult romance, and her Regencies were the first Regencies that I got into. And so then that was a whole other, like, the thing about romance is a lot like YA, right? You can find anything in it. There's something for everyone. Yeah, we're a little bit like aggressive when people come in and like they start side-eyeing the romance section. We're like, no, we wanted a prominent romance section because we have a ton of romance readers on staff. Like half our staff is romance readers. And we like it. We like recommending it, and we like recommending it to people who wouldn't read it, because it's so much different than what people perceive it to be.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's not at all what people think it is.
People think it's like people's attitudes about romance who don't read it are really trapped like 30 years ago. Like I did a Ted Lasso podcast about rom-coms, and with this very sweet Richmond Till We Die team. I highly recommend it if you're a Ted Lasso fan. And they were so lovely to me. But one of them said to me at the end, like, I feel like I see so many of the things that I loved differently now, because I didn't realize like part of what I loved in them was like was actually what you would find in romance books. And they're like, you know, like, what would you write fanfic for? And I'm like, you know, I was like, I would write like a pretentious, over the top, like Ted Lasso, as like James Joyce, like stream of consciousness, because I feel like that's what his inner monologue must be like. But I was like, there actually are already romance novels being written and sold comp to Ted Lasso, and there are tons of stories that have that vibe. And like the thing about Ted Lasso that a lot of people love is exactly what you would find in a modern romance, and like people who haven't read it just don't realize that.
Yeah, they just don't know that. They're like, oh, that's a trope you like, and like you don't know, identify it as that.
right, like they don't realize that like modern romance would not have Keely be like just mortified at being caught having a wank. I mean, it's like, it's like, no, like you would give them Rosie Dannon's book and be like, see, like this is someone getting caught doing exactly that, and it turns into a nice sharing moment, you know.
Somebody mentioned in the chat that romance has been such a lifeline during the pandemic, which
Absolutely.
is very true.
Very true. Very true.
Like I've read it for probably about a decade. The first, like, I got into like the paranormal romances is where I started. I like got kicked off with Sherilyn Kenyon, was where I like blew through the dark, like the Dark Hunter series and the J.R. Wards, those are the ones that I first got into like a decade ago. And then like
I love all of them.
Oh, they're so good.
Delaney Singh was one of the very first.
Oh yeah, great.
And I would just be like, this is the best, most complicated science fiction series in the world. Fight me about science fiction.
And like people don't realize like how like lore heavy and mythology heavy some of these books are.
Just
like,
genius.
Wildly so.
Yes. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but like when I discovered romance, I was totally like, it was like rediscovering reading and my love of reading. And I remember, I would be like there buying, but I'd like drive out to where I could get a Wi-Fi signal, you know, to like order things when they went up for sale, because
I was working in a used bookstore at the time. And so I was tracking them down through different used booksellers and different ones in town. And I'm like, okay, the next one in the series is at this one, and the next one in the series is at that one. And I was like perusing, you know, I worked at Half Price Books, so you're the first person to see when stuff comes in, and I'd be like,
so
mine, and this is mine.
I remember being so disappointed when the local indie, which has a great romance section, it's only gotten better because the GM is a big romance reader and they've been so supportive. Which was not the case like years ago. Like I remember going in and like they just didn't have Courtney Milan, and this was when she was still being published by Harlequin. And it's like, we don't have this. Like,
and you don't have a romance section.
Paltry at best. Oh, actually, I shouldn't say this. I won't say what store it is, but I went to a store to sign stock that hadn't come in yet the other day.
You're all okay.
You know, it's fine. I actually was fine with that. I'm like, you can't control it. You're busy. You didn't call me. It's fine.
And the supply demand is wild. Like
I did post a picture because I did get for the first time I was like, well, it probably whatever you have is in the romance section. And they were like, oh, we don't have that section here. And I'm like, excuse me, like what? Like you invited me here, and then we find my books, and like the one book that they still have left, they haven't sold, is like sadly sandwiched between Roberto Bolaño and Jorge Borges. And so I took a picture and I put it online. I put it online, and a bookseller friend from Boston was like, I think I'm going to save, and I didn't put any context other than unlikely shelf mates. And a bookseller friend in Boston was like, I'm going to save this to my camera roll as an example of the store that says, we don't need a romance section. We brought in a couple of those and they didn't sell.
And you're like, and you wonder why it doesn't sell.
I'm like, and you got all that from one picture. Yeah,
that's how booksellers look at pictures, and you're like, this is why you don't have a romance section and why you think romance doesn't sell, because you put it in weird places.
Like, also, why did you invite me here? But anyway.
Like, why'd you invite me here if you're so romance hostile? Like,
they thought I was YA, I think. It's like, oh, well, I've been looked down on for that for years, babes. Like, it's fine. I'm used to that.
You're like, I'll sign it. Thanks, guys.
Whatever. She doesn't even go here.
Somebody else asked you, how long did it take you to write this book?
This book actually took quite a while because I was writing it like kind of as a passion project in between other things. And so I started it in 2017 and we sold it, which means it was done in fall of 2019. So that doesn't sound that long when I say it that way, but for me, that's pretty long because usually I'm working, like pretty steadily, but I had to like stop and write the Stranger Things book. And I think there was another project or two in there, also some burnout and major surgery. But like once I finally got time to like sort of actually work on it, I would say it was about 6 months. And then so I'd worked on it probably 6 months before that too, because it didn't have a deadline. So I had a little bit more freedom to just kind of work on it when I wanted to. And again, I worked on it just for pleasure because I had no idea. I think, and I've been so grateful that people have had fun with the book and have embraced it because, like I said, it's weird. It sort of straddles the line between YA and adult, right? It's sort of like, it's kind of in between. And the next one is much more like kind of over that adult line. But
I think a lot of us want it to get more adult.
It's even this series is gonna get more adult in the second book.
Yeah, I was like, I think some of us are like ready for those more adult scenes.
Yeah, it's gonna get more adult for sure. And in the Mr. and Mrs. Witch, like these characters, I just cannot keep them. I couldn't keep them apart if I tried. Like, so yeah, and that's been a fun book just because there's so much fun, like stuff you can do with witch lore to put your own spin on it. And will there be a capybara familiar? There will.
Oh, Aiden hates our capybara puppet.
It's the puppet that scares me. It's not capybaras. I think they're great. The puppet is terrifying looking. It is haunted. I cannot.
It's adorable.
Oh,
so I don't know what she's talking about.
Well, actually,
no,
I probably shouldn't give this away before the book is done because my editor's going to get this and be like, what? But in this book, familiars can also glamour themselves to look like, so they usually have a glamour that makes them look like a normal animal. So the capybara appears usually as a fluffy white dog that I auctioned off for like someone to pick a familiar animal, and like so some other might be a leopard, but it looks like a cat. Might be a because it's like, well, why if witches can glamour themselves, like why
not?
Why wouldn't familiars be able to glamour themselves? And then you could have like an ostrich familiar that usually appears as something else.
I love the idea of an ostrich familiar.
Oh, there is one. Orangey. It's Auntie Simone familiar.
I love her already.
And Peggy the horse / frog.
I like handy. This concept. This is really handy. This is really convenient.
Raven is only a raven. Cretan the Raven doesn't glamour.
This is a way to get around all those pesky like exotic pet laws.
Well, they masquerade as an animal rescue.
This is perfect.
But they're actually a spy, like a supernatural like spy agency that uses witchcraft.
I'm really excited to get the arc of this one now.
I have to finish it this month. So yeah.
So what made it, you've mentioned that it was kind of hard to write during the pandemic. Like why was it kind of hard for you? Because I've heard a lot of writers say that they're like, I got so much writing done. I had nothing to do.
I mean, I also got a lot done. I shouldn't lie. And I did that big fundraising project I was telling you guys about. That was like the first half of my pandemic was all that. like creators for comics. Like me and my friend and a few of my friends panicked that like we were going to come out of the pandemic and there would be no indie bookstores or comic shops left. And so we were like, we have to do something. And so we created this like Twitter auction and raised a bunch of money. And then there was a lot of admin out of that, you know what I mean? Like, but it was totally a labor of love, but like we really, none of us, I don't think, wrote a word on anything like during the 2 months that we sort of got consumed by that. And by then, I'm almost late on my deadline already, and I barely started the second book. The good thing was we had quite a bit of wiggle room, and it actually worked out well in a way that things don't. So the editor that acquired this first book, Tiffany Shelton, who is amazing, and I adore her, and she's now back at St. Martin's, left between books. And so if I had turned in the second book on time, it would have been in a much more awkward state. But in this way, I got reassigned to my new editor, Jenny Conway, who I also adore. And so we were able to work together on the second book as opposed to her being handed 2 books that were already done, right? And St. Martin's, I just can't say enough good things about them, and everyone there just, you know, were great. And so it was good that it was 5 months late because everything was late. And also you know, then my editor and I got to work together on it, the new editor. And, you know, honestly, it was too much news reading. Like I went to therapy for the first time and I'm like, I'm not working, which is not normal for me. Because that's usually how I shut things out. And she's like, so tell me about how you're doing your day. And I'm like, well, I start the day by reading a lot of news. And then I'm very angry for most of the rest of the day. And I take a stress nap in the afternoon. And she's like, and so just reading that news, do you feel like you're solving all the world's problems right away every day? And I'm like, fuck you. Like,
you're like, I need to know what doom is coming at me. Thank you. Before I take my stress nap.
How dare you nail me within 10 minutes of our first session?
Oh man, the stuff that my therapist has told me, I've been like, excuse you.
I mean,
see yourself out, but okay.
Exactly. So then I started playing spelling bee first thing in the morning, and that helped. And also my friend Cammie really did drag me over the finish line of the second book. We would do Pomodoro sessions where we would text and we'd do 45 minutes on, 15 minutes off. And she would text me when we were starting, and we'd do a couple every afternoon. And we also, later in the pandemic, when you sort of knew more and could have small gatherings, we would have a couple of friends who live locally, Ellie Kilcoyne, whose YA debut is out next spring, and Lee Mandello, whose Summer Sons is great and just came out, lives around the block. We got like a little writer hub here, and they would come write in our backyard on the patio that my husband made me to write on at the beginning.
He's like, go out there.
He was like, here's your writer patio, honey. And it just slowly kept getting added on to over the summer. And now we have the writer's room again, but it was hard. But then once I got that book turned in, it was kind of, I did have lots of ideas during the pandemic and lots of projects that are like coming to fruition now. You know, like I worked on several other book ideas that, like Mr. and Mrs. Witch, that then we sold in the spring, and a couple of other things that are secret. And Cammie and Sam and I had so much fun working on charity work together that we basically invented a project so that we could continue you know, like texting and having Zoom calls with each other all the time. So we're writing a 3 novella series together for audio first, and then hopefully it will be published. Yeah, it's like Succession, but with a family. Yeah. It's Succession, but with a family of demons. That is the pitch.
I love it. So is your nonprofit like open now and functioning?
It is. It's lexwritersroom.com. We actually moved to a 200-year-old building that was a much better fit than our original space.
Is it haunted?
I mean, some would say yes. It definitely has a spooky ass basement. It's more than 200 years old, actually. And it is just down the street. And we have most of the first floor now, and about 42 writers as of today that are signed up. And so people come in and hang out. We've got all the stuff to do virtual events from there. So like for my book launch, Scalzi, who's an old friend who once slept on a, as he likes to say, slowly deflating mattress in our living room when he came to visit, got a fancy hotel room across the street, and we did it in our salon, and with an audience of our members who were all vaccinated, and like beamed it out on Zoom to everyone else. And so we're hoping to be able to host more things like that for people so they can have like kind of the best of both worlds, like a little bit of immediate feedback. And yeah, it's great. Actually, there's a bunch of people nanoing, so it's been kind of hopping this week. And,
oh yeah, it's that month.
Yeah. It's cool. I mean, I really like, I'm a big believer in mentoring and like paying things forward, and creating space and community is really important to me. And so it's really been a dream project, and we've gotten a couple grants, and we've been supported by some very generous book people who have sort of helped us because our costs are very low. We run all by volunteers. We have a director who's super good at vintage shopping and like grabbing things on sale, and at putting things together that don't go together and making it look like funky and creative and good energy. And I'm not that person, so that's like, it's good that we met her. But like, no, it's been a real dream. Actually, this year, a lot of my non-writing work has gone towards like us getting the nonprofit like really off the ground. And I think it's going to be
that's really exciting. It sounds like
really
cool thing. Yeah.
I think it's a really special place. And we also have we have a partner. We have several scholarships for underrepresented writers to help pay. But like the whole idea of the nonprofit is to make it affordable, because most co-working spaces are not. And like a lot of writers, when they're starting out, don't have good spaces, don't have supportive communities, or have kids and need like some quiet time. So we have a couple underrepresented writer scholarships, and we have a partnership with the Kentucky Black Writers Collaborative so that we pay half of their stipend, and another local nonprofit that created that program pays the other half. So yeah, we've been able to do some pretty cool stuff. I'm very excited about it. As you can tell, this is like my
congratulations. It's really cool. I'm just so excited that you got to spend the pandemic doing something so exciting. So good.
Yeah. I'm just glad it actually became a thing. And it's like, yeah, this is where sometimes we'll all just like look around each other and be like, yeah, there are books that are going to be written in this place that wouldn't be written otherwise. And that's like a really good feeling.
That's awesome. I'm really excited for you. I'm really excited to read book 2.
Yeah, well, I'll make sure you guys get them, and also get a copy or two to throw in randomly in someone's box.
Oh, maybe we can do a little giveaway, or like find someone who like buys. That'd be really fun. We would really appreciate that. I've been doing that,
yeah, with most bookstores, but because you guys already sold the books, like I've been doing the anyone who buys from the bookstore gets entered into a giveaway thing, but like you could just give it away.
Yeah. Well, thank you for chatting with us. We really enjoyed the book. We really liked sharing it with our club. Yay. Excited to read book 2, and I'm excited for when you can come down and see us in person.
Yes, me too. It's a date.
I know. When you can come and see us live.
I can't wait. And thanks to everyone who came and everyone who read the book. And this was so much fun. What a great last virtual event of the year.
Thank you. I'm so glad. Bye, everyone. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.